We will get started, and we will start with our opening statement from Janelle Holst.
Thank you so much for having us this morning. My name is Janelle Holst. I'm a small business owner and a mother, born and raised in Washington. I love our state, and I want to keep it a place where we can afford to live, where it's safe to live, where it's attractive to businesses, and that supports these businesses. I am ready to bring safety back to our communities. I'm ready to bring accountability to our government programs and officials in ways that we've never had, as well as affordability that we have not received this last legislative session. And I'm thankful to be in a position that I can step up for the people to serve the people, as I feel that is how our government is meant to be run. So I want to ensure that our government make way for the things that we need to have in our society, including solutions for homelessness, and to help those that are stuck in cycles, including that of drug addiction. So I will ensure that we will have pathways to easily hold and safely and responsibly hold all of our elected and unelected officials accountable, as well as to ensure that businesses can thrive and survive in any crisis. It is the role of the government to support businesses and the people, not the control. So I will ensure that the people will be informed and well aware of how to hold all of our programs accountable according to the laws that we already have in place, which is RCW 42.56. So again, my name is Janelle Holst. I'm a small business owner and mother who is willfully stepping up to see our state to a greater place than we are today.
Thank you, Janelle. Next, Tara Simmons.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you to the Chamber for all that you do for our community. It's been an honor to serve you over the last couple of years. For those that don't know me, I'm Tara Simmons. I'm the current state representative for the 23rd Legislative District. In Position 1, I am a former registered nurse. I'm also an attorney and a nonprofit director of an organization that helps people reintegrate back into the community after incarceration. I grew up here in Kitsap County. I'm homegrown. I raised my family here. I have 2 sons. One is now a United States Marine recently, but we all went through the Central Kitsap School District. I went to Olympic College and then transferred to Pacific Lutheran University in Seattle for law school. I currently serve on the healthcare committee, which is relevant because of my background as a registered nurse. I'm also on the public safety committee, and I am also the rights and judiciary committee and the rules committee. During my first term, I was very successful in passing 6 pieces of bipartisan legislation to advance voting rights for people who have been incarcerated, to bring charity care, which is free or reduced medical care for people utilizing our hospital here at St. Michael's, in addition to a variety of other things. I really try to focus on mental health. That's very important to me, based on my lived experience as someone that's in long-term recovery from substance use disorder. I just celebrated 11 years. I'm most proud of is being able to get a budget provider for the chamber here that is going to provide small grants to organizations.
Thank you very much to the Chamber for
people who are very organized and animated toward economic development, job creation, to be active in our community. So I'm very grateful for the chamber for what they do. I'm running for this position because the two little people I left at home when I came here this morning. My kids are 3 years old and 1 year old, and we have a third on the way, and I look at the future that they may expect, and I have a lot of concerns about the direction that our state has been going in. I'm a lifelong resident of this community, of this district, and I have no interest in seeing us slide into the wrong direction, into and I know so many of us who screw vote for our kids is a better life than what we had. I'm concerned that what my children face in the future is not a better life than what I have grown up with. I am running because I care about economic development. I care about the burden of taxes and regulations. I'm running because I'm concerned about our crime, our increase in crime. I'm grateful to have the support of our law enforcement in this race, and I'm looking forward to getting new women working to push back against the rising crime we've seen. I want to take a minute during my opening statement to actually eat up a little bit of time on something that I think is really important. And it came up this week in my race. Addison and I have, I think, sort of unwittingly and not really on purpose, made a name for ourselves for our civility and our respect for one another. I really appreciate that. There was just an article written in the newsfeed in the way about the dynamics in our race. I'm really grateful for that. So I was incredibly disappointed when I saw this week that my party had put out what I saw at least 2 hit pieces on my opponent. Very negative. And that is exactly the opposite of what we have talked about doing in this race. And so I was sorry to see that, and I think that this is an opportunity for us to reaffirm our pledge to civility in our discourse, to running races based on issues, not personalities, and to not descend into personal attacks. This is a good man, and I have been grateful to run alongside him, and I look forward to our substantive discussion today with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Next, Addison Richards.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I also want to extend thanks to the Greater Kitsap Chamber, not only for hosting this forum, but also for all the work that you do in our community. I want to thank all of you for getting up early and joining us for some politics. Really appreciate that. I'm Addison Richards, and I am also running for state representative, 26th district. It goes from Bremerton to Gig Harbor. This is my home. It's where I grew up. I went to high school down the road in Purdy at Peninsula. I volunteered up here in the Bremerton area with organizations like Scarlet Road, which helps survivors of trafficking. My granddad retired from the Navy, and his ship was retired up here in the shipyard. I've knocked on 15,000 doors in this race personally. And I've done it for a simple reason. I should meet, I want to meet, I need to meet the people I hope to represent. And I want to be accessible to you, I want to be accountable to you, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell me what matters most to you. It should be no surprise that in talking to all the people that I have, that 2 issues come up the most. First is concern about the economy and our rising costs. And second, concerns about public safety. I've sat in courtrooms next to clients, not only wondering where their next meal was coming from, but also if they would have protection for them and their kids. I've stayed up late, working on questions, about the client tell their story to a room full of strangers so she can get protection for her kids. I've been in offices, filling out expense and income sheets, with a client, in conference rooms with prosecutors and judges and law enforcement talking about how to deal with domestic violence. I've represented people who feel the system isn't working for them and would otherwise be up against the system alone. I've represented people in court. I would love the opportunity working for my dad, doing landscape work, digging irrigation trenches, to enjoy a cup of coffee. There's a lot of great things, but I gotta tell you, when I learned other people can make coffee better, it changed my life. With that, I look forward to the conversation.
Next up, James DeHart.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I would like to first thank the Greater Kitsap Chamber for having me here. It's a real honor, and also it's great being at a really cool restaurant that you both love early. So, and I'm also really honored to be up here with all of these wonderful folks. My name is James DeHart. I'm running for the 35th Legislative District, Position 1 Representative. The 35th Legislative District is huge. It's just kind of give you an idea, it's the size of Rhode Island. And it goes from the bottom of Kitsap all the way through Mason County and then through a good portion of Thurston County. Redistricting was quite interesting this year, so I'm really excited to be here. And I live in rural Thurston County. I moved to Washington State in 2006 with my partner. And the reason why is because I grew up in Montana. And in 2004, Montana enacted a marriage ban that basically sent us out of the state for the search to be a full first classes. So I'm running because Washington State gave me a home. It gave me a place to thrive. It gave me a place to get my bearings on, and also now it is giving me the opportunity to run for this office. I looked around when I moved to the 35th LD 2 years ago, and I went,
53?
the roads and bridges are crumbling. The environment is getting destroyed.
Right here. I'm just
And there are 3 representatives that are doing absolutely nothing. So it's time for a rural Democrat to make their way to the legislature and make sure that our rural areas are protected environmentally and that we are rebuilding our infrastructure in sustainable ways, not just repairable ways, but sustainable ways. This is important. In 2009, a bridge collapsed in the middle of Minneapolis, Minnesota into a river. The reason why is because their conservative legislature kept punting and punting and punting repairs for that bridge. And suddenly it fell, and people died. It's time that somebody actually says yes to rebuilding our infrastructure around this district. I'm very excited to also be a career public servant. I have actually worked for the state of Washington for almost 14 years, and now I work for Mason County Commissioner's Office as our public records officer. One thing that I do in those years that I've been working in public service is about transparency. My opponent actually voted to keep legislative records secret from the people. I will do the exact opposite. My records, my goings on in the legislature will be public. And I will make sure that I am accountable to everybody here. Thank you very much for having me here again. I'm really excited, and we're going to get into this now.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Here. What makes you more qualified to serve the residents of Kitsap County than your opponent?
Well, I have a perspective for what's structurally sound and what works for all people equally. And so I feel that my perspective is focused on what is within the boundaries of my responsibility and role as a legislature. So I'm well knowledgeable in the Constitution and in compassion, and I have a background that includes similarities in my opponent's background, but I also have the perspective for what's best for everyone and has a path for resolution and enablement of opportunities and tools that's inclusive of all of the community to give back. And I think that's something that is very much so lacking right now in our work.
Thank you. Tara.
Can you repeat the question?
What makes you more qualified to serve the residents of Kitsap County than your opponent?
I think a few things. First, I grew up here in this community, so I am very much entrenched in the grocery workers, the teachers, the nurses. I mean, I've lived here since I was 13 years old, and I know the community, and I know the people here. Second, I would say that my network since I've been in the legislature and my experience actually getting bills through the process, which is, it takes a little bit of time to learn. I learned that through my advocacy before I joined the legislature. So before I even became a member, I was down there passing bills and having other members sponsor them, but working across the aisle and talking with legislators and lobbyists and community members, stakeholders across Washington state to pass legislation before I even got there. And that's why I was uniquely effective in my first term in passing 6 major pieces of legislation. So the network and the relationships that I've cultivated over the last couple of years cannot be matched. Last, I would say my legal career, my background as a lawyer is very helpful in working throughout the different branches.
Thank you, Tara. Spencer, same question.
There's a lot that is similar with Addison and myself. We grew up in this community. We're legally educated. There's a lot that we have in common. Me personally, I think a record of public service is something that I'm very proud of. I was on the Gay Harbor Planning Commission, served on the Gay Harbor City Council. That gave me an opportunity to learn how to effectively make policy across the aisle. And there were many times when I was working with people who may not agree with me ideologically. Very involved in my community, through nonprofits and leadership in my church, and fundraising for our local food bank, raising $8 million to build a new permanent facility to serve people in need in our community. That's very, very important. I've had the opportunity to serve in staff positions at the congressional level, at the legislative level in Olympia, and I think all of that experience will help me to hit the ground running in Olympia. Having been a local business owner with offices in Port Orchard, Silverdale, and Gig Harbor, that brings another perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer.
I have experience that will not only help me understand issues we face like rising costs and public safety, but actually help me deliver in Majority Caucus for this community. I'm proud to have the support of so many partners across our area, including the Mayor of Bremerton, including the Kitsap County Prosecutor Chad Enright, including the Kitsap County Sheriff, including members of the Bremerton City Council, school board members, and council members down in Port Orchard. On top of that, I've been active in this community. Like I said, I've volunteered to organizations up here. My legal work has included working up here in Kitsap County. I have a fun thing I do, which is sing with an awesome praise group over at St. Clair Baptist Church here in Bremerton. It's a huge exercise where I get my artistic side. But look, I've got this experience that I'm hoping to use for this community and this district and actually deliver results on the things that matter most to people I've heard from at the doors and knocking on so many of your doors here in Kitsap County. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. James?
So what makes me more qualified than my opponent? For the past decade and a half, I've worked for 6 state agencies as a records person. I worked in social services, Utilities and Transportation Commission, the Department of Transportation, Department of Early Learning, and the Department of Children and Families. I worked in an administrative role, and to me, that will serve me very well in the legislature, because how many of you have seen bills that are pretty lofty ideas and pretty low in implementation? So I've been at the implementation level for many, many years, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. So I will bring common sense and a great idea of how to implement laws and issues going forward, so that we aren't caught in some sort of limbo of chaos trying to figure out how to do something good.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Tara. We had this last week, and I applaud whoever wrote this question, because it shouldn't have been here many years ago. With a magic wand, what one piece of legislation would you like to magically get signed by the governor during the next legislative session?
Basically,
Yeah, if you can just wave your magic wand, what piece of legislation would you have enacted during the next session?
oh my goodness, that's a really difficult one because everything is so intersectional. But I think at the root of it all is around a fair tax policy. So we have the funding that we need to provide the services that people need, while we're doing it in a way that uplifts the working families and relieves some tax burden for working families. So at the end of the day, getting to a fair tax structure in Washington State, where the super wealthy are paying, their fair share on a percentage-wise, and working families are getting some relief. And if we did that, we would have enough funding to actually invest in homelessness and behavioral health care. I mean, we are facing so many challenges that are rooted in behavioral health and untreated substance use and mental health, and that is increasing our public safety problems and also not providing enough housing. And if we had fair tax policy, that would be best.
Thank you, Sharon. Spencer?
I think if I were to wave a magic wand and have the governor sign anything into law, it would be a repeal of the, I think, reckless and unwise anti-police legislation that was passed over the last few sessions. I think the police pursuit law was really ill-advised and unfortunately has led to an increase in crime and knowledge among criminals of what they can get away with. And I know people, including yourself, have experienced personally the effects of our increased crime. I think the quote-unquote fix to the Blake decision was not fixed at all and downgraded drug possession offenses and is not helping our problem. You can have a minor walk out of their house with alcohol and be charged with minor possession. They can walk out of their house with fentanyl and be charged with nothing. So I think we have a problem on our hands with that. I'm really grateful to have the endorsement of the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs, the Fraternal Order of Police. I think they recognize that what I'm bringing to the table in this campaign is some rationality and balance around our criminal laws.
Thank you, Spencer. Yes.
One of the things on the list that I have the governor sign is legislation to provide checks and balances on the governor in cases of emergency. I am concerned about the duration and extent to which the governor has emergency powers without checks from the legislature and any oversight from the legislature. I think we need to do that immediately, and I hope we accomplish that.
Thank you, guys. James?
If I could have the governor saying anything, it would be universal health care. Washington State deserves a treatment. They deserve to walk away from a doctor's office without having to worry about how they're going to be able to give it up. I know my father-in-law injured his neck some years ago. They built their dream house and only got to live in it for 3 years before they had to sell it and move because his health care bills had gotten so out of hand and all of the extra charges had gotten so crazy that they literally sold the dream house. It was amazing. So to me, we deserve to be healthy first off. That is what is going to put us as a baseline as human beings as being healthy. And then after that, let's work for fixing our societal ills. But everybody in this room's healthcare is my concern, and your family's healthcare is my concern as well.
Thank you, James. Janelle?
Well, if I had a magic wand, I would love to be able to see legislation for survivability and affordability. And that would include during crisis that our government would reduce taxes and make way and reduce regulations so we could have more homes being built, which is why we have an affordability housing crisis right now. But when we continue to have to pay higher taxes through crisis, that puts a big toll on our businesses, especially our smallest businesses, our local businesses, which includes my own. I'm a small business owner. We have a construction business, and which I do drafting and design. So what that looks like in this last legislative session was we have no affordability brought through in our crises, even though we had a $15 billion surplus of taxes. So it's not that we don't have enough taxes coming in to make this happen, it's that we just don't have the means to do so.
Thank you. Next question. Looks like we'll start with Spencer. Spencer, how have you helped small businesses in Kitsap thrive and grow during your career?
Well, I am a local small business owner in Kitsap, and I can tell you that as an employer legislator and as a small business owner, it is incredibly frustrating to see the government treat small businesses like a bottomless well of resources to take and take and take, and not just from a tax standpoint, but also from the implementation of regulations. Often the state treats businesses like an arm of the government to implement regulations, unfunded mandates, that is very difficult. And I think small business owners in the room can understand that just because you are in small business does not mean you are endlessly wealthy by any stretch. It is hard work, it is a lot of hours, and it is often very little reward. So what have I done to help small businesses in our community? I have been one. I have been one. And as a Gig Harbor City Council member, I sought to pursue policies that would make it easier, a little less burdensome to hire just one more person, to stay open just a little bit longer, to provide just a little bit more service to our community. That's the mentality the state has to have.
Thank you, Spencer. Excellent.
Well, not only, I already mentioned growing up working for my dad's landscape business, I worked at a small shoe shop in college, and I also, well, my granddad, when he got back from the Navy, he opened up a liquor store where we're going, and a laundromat. So small businesses have just been a part of who I am. More directly, I've got experience working with the Gig Harbor Waterfront Alliance and volunteered at different events that they have, and I would just love to do more than volunteer to help small businesses. That's one of the reasons I'm up here. I want to help lower and reform, taxes, provide accounting, licensing assistance, and do so much more to provide and support our small businesses in the community.
Thank you, guys. James?
So I'm actually from rural Coaching County, so I don't make my way up to Kitsap all that often, except for this campaign probably here many times. But as a former state employee and now as a Mason County employee, small businesses are the backbone of our communities. They're not owned by the rich guys up in Seattle, they're owned by your neighbors. And to me, that's vitally important to visit those businesses, to patronize those businesses, and to make sure that those businesses also, and I am so lucky to become legislator, to basically lower the taxes and try and help them get off the ground rather than getting Walmart and hand out to fill the roundabout by their store or give Target parking lot. It's about time that we started working with our small businesses to make sure that they can actually thrive a lot more than, like I said, Walmart. Our legislators are doing way too much to those larger corporations to protect their small businesses.
Thank you.
Could you represent the question?
Yes. How have you helped small businesses in Kitsap thrive and grow during your career?
Well, like Spencer said, I have become one, and so that I can now bring forth my experience as being a small business owner and the perspective that I have and from where I come from. My husband and I, would love to be able to help those who need a hand up and to have a new path for life and a new experience to, have an opportunity to have journeyman programs within our own business, also for drafting, not just only with the labor. So I bring that perspective, and so that's something that we are an established contractor in our community. We give help and encouragement where we can with our customers and network and make those connections, and so that is something that I plan to take and to continue to do with working with the Kitsap Builders Alliance and bringing forth for affordable housing, as I have a much deeper, broader perspective with that to involve community to make that happen and government to make way for it.
Thank you. Tara?
Yeah, so I've lived here in Kitsap County almost my entire life, so it's natural that I've been frequenting a lot of small businesses here and, pushing people towards those small businesses, using my, success in my personal story and my platform to amplify the efforts of small businesses here. But specifically in my career, last session I did get a $250,000 budget proviso for this Chamber of Commerce. So you can work on developing business owners, small businesses from historically marginalized backgrounds and bringing them into the fold. I've also been working with Jamie Forsyth, who now I think is, I can't remember her name that took over, around business development for young entrepreneurs who don't have experience. And lastly, I was very proud to co-sponsor and vote on legislation that removes the B&O tax for small business owners and reduced B&O taxes for all business owners in the last session.
Thank you, Tara. And yes, Jamie did retire, and I don't recall. Joyce. Thank you. Thank you. I'm right there with you. Still too new. Next question, we start with Addison. We're going to continue along the lines of business here. Do you believe there's a wage gap between men and women, or between individuals of different ethnicities? What would you be able to do to address that gap?
The data shows that that gap does exist. Ultimately, I think that what we need to do is not only help our small businesses, like I said, lower B&O taxes and provide more accounting licensing assistance so they can pass more on to their workers, but also invest in our education system. I'm a coach in my spare time. I get to see these kids running around right now. They're really getting squeezed between not seeing pathway to trades on the one hand as a good option, and on the other hand, unaffordable college. And we have to address those things. And if we create pathways to trades for more and more people, if we make college more affordable for more and more people, and I'm not a pre-college person, I believe that we should just go back to what we had a generation ago, which was being able to pay for school by working through it. And so if we do some of those things, then I think we'll see these kinds of gaps grow smaller.
Thank you, Addison. James?
There's absolutely a gap, not only between genders, but between people of color as well. In fact, I think it's around 89 cents per $1 for every man's job. And as we go down the list, Latino even less, and black men even less, and black women even less. This is wrong, and Washington State needs to lead on this issue. Washington State has a chance to put these laws on the books and make sure that we have a state fair and equitable society for pay and for jobs. This is vital to our survival as Washingtonians. It's vital to the survival of our state. And we need to make sure that this next generation that comes up has equal pay for equal work, and I'm willing to give that up.
Janelle?
So I believe that a way to help equally bring people forth into business and entrepreneurship is to provide more opportunities and have a say for local communities. And that, when it comes to regulation, when we have an entrepreneur who wants to open a community store in their neighborhood, I think that the local community should be able to petition to allow it to happen rather than be disallowed because of regulations. And I think with the encouragement and education, that is one thing that really helps to bring people out and to step into areas that they normally feel that is
standards and price per vote standards and bring them online standards that cannot be met simultaneously. I think that the priority of our transportation system has got to be get the votes to serve the community as quickly as possible. That's my view, and that needs to be the priority of our state transportation system. I think we also have a major workforce problem. Coming through COVID, we saw major reductions in our ferry workforce. It's going to lead to more delays, it's going to lead to more accidents, and it's totally unfair to people who have lost their livelihoods because they are no longer able to work in our ferry system, which we need them to do in order to get ourselves and our goods to market and to our jobs and to our education. So I think there's those are my views on what needs to change.
Thank you, Spencer. Addison?
One thing I know is that we should not be paying increasing fares for decreasing service. We need to make sure that there is accountability for those leading agencies like the state ferries, while supporting the workforce that's trying to keep the boats running every day. I'm encouraged by some of the progress that we've seen, but we need a lot more of it. I would love to partner with Tara on projects that partner with Kitsap Transit to create more fast ferries and build upon that model at a state level, get people across the town more, because what we know is that a related issue on housing, King County's solution to housing has been Kitsap County. People are moving out here, the sprawl is starting to kill us, more and more people are looking to use the ferries and are otherwise driving around clogging up I-5. to get to jobs in Seattle because it's unaffordable to live there because Seattle keeps acting like it's not a big city. So we've got to work on our housing solution that can also help ease some of the congestion issues we see with the ferries.
Thank you, Edison. James?
I agree with a lot of what has been said here, so I won't fear repeating a lot of it. But one thing that I would look into doing is a lot more incentives towards apprenticeship programs for the folks that work on the boats. The reason why the boats are late is because they have to have a specific number of people to sail the boat. That's just the down and dirty of it. And so we need, and yes, the pandemic did create a whole host of issues, especially with the vaccine mandate. But we need the next generation to know that there is a place that they can go to apprentice to be a ferry worker. And I'll tell you, I get to look when I started WashDOT, my job actually pertained to the ferry system. And I was lucky enough to go from the pilot house all the way down to the engineers. And it's vitally important that we have a new generation joining these boats to make sure that they can sail on time and replace them with sustainable areas as well.
Thank you, James. Next question. Looks like we start with Tara. Team, I have tons more questions around transportation, around mandatory road use charges, increases in gas taxes, things like that. We're out of time on transportation, so if you need to weave that in, do so as you may see fit. The next topic, and I have multiple questions on that, comes around law enforcement and changes that have been made in public safety. So I'm just going to throw that whole topic out there and let you tackle it as you may see fit around, and you've got to go around twice, we may do that, but let's talk about public safety and law enforcement.
All right, well, I would like more time, but so what do I say? I say that, I am a person who really believes we can advance justice and safety together. I believe there's a lot of underlying causes of crime. Crime is up right now all across the nation, and it's even higher in states that did not do any police reform in the way that Georgia did. I-940 was passed by the people of Washington State. They wanted police accountability. There is no reason why police officers should not be accountable as teachers and nurses are. I'm a lawyer, I'm a nurse. If I do something wrong, I lose my license. There was no decertification process prior to 2021. So I worked with law enforcement. We passed a slate of bills, probably about 13 of them. I am proudly endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. I worked with our local law enforcement through the whole process. There were some unintended consequences around the vehicular pursuit, but out of 13 bills, you cannot expect to get everything right. And we only ended up with a couple of places we need tweaks, and hopefully we'll have more time on the topic.
Totally agree with needing more time on the topic. Thank you. Start where Tara left off on unintended consequences. And I'm going to talk about something higher level than just crime. Our policymaking in Olympia needs to be well thought out. It needs to be disciplined. It needs to go through the committee process, amendments, edits, debate, discussion, dialogue. And unfortunately, what we have had over the last few legislative sessions is a majority in Olympia that has been so large that it does not need to talk to the minority party. It doesn't need to bring in minority voices in the making of policy. My philosophy of government is the best policy happens when the two political parties need to talk to each other. And we have had a system in Olympia where that has not been the case. And I think the bad policies around crime, the unintended consequences around crime have come from not having these policies be tested in the legislative process. So there's a whole lot more that we need to say about crime. We are all feeling it. We are all feeling it out there. But from a broad level, a 30,000-foot level, Olympia needs to change its approach to policy making.
Thank you, Spencer. Madison?
I wasn't in the legislature the past couple years while these bills were being passed. I was sitting at tables representing survivors of crime. Representing people who have experienced crime is how I approach this issue. And I'm proud to have the support of our Kitsap County Sheriff, of first responders like South Kitsap firefighters. We pass on way too much of a lot of problems onto our first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, like our substance abuse and mental health crises. We need to approach those entirely different than ER, jail cells, and tents on the street. And make law enforcement and firefighters the first responders to our failures there. So look, there's a host of issues. To to work on here. I know that one thing I support is looking at pursuing hard vets. I know live in places like the Key Peninsula, cars are lifelines. How you get to the doctor, how you get to your job, how you get to the grocery store, how you get anywhere without public transportation on our roads out here, and we have to address that issue.
Thank you, Addison. James?
So I want to address the reason for crime, not the crime itself. So what we need is we need community programs, especially addiction programs, and as well as community mental health programs. One thing that every time a school shooting happens, the first thing that people say, we need to deal with mental health. Okay, great. Then let's start funding community mental health programs to help people get the help they need. Crime is bad, yes, but we need to address the underlying issues that bring crime out. And you know, a lot of the times it's just people who are frustrated with their daily life. They're not able to have housing. They're not able to get mental health. What are we going to do to help these people who desperately need this help so they can become functioning members of society? So I propose that, yes, we have public safety, but again, I also look for justice as well and making sure people get help they need.
Thank you, James. Jim?
Yes, if we can go around the table again, that'll be great because we need more time to definitely talk about it. So when it comes to responsible legislation, that's very important. Being able to listen and collaborate and work well with all people that you are put at a table with is very important. And pushing through bills rashly is not a solution to a problem. And I think the routes for accountability still were not adequately put in place for those who experience police brutality and those type of things. And then when it comes to crime, I think that was a great statement to be from the perspective of the victim, because many people make excuses or make small of the situations of crime when it comes to stolen cars. My customer was hit by a stolen car. Someone who stole a car on the other side of the ferry, rode the ferry without paying a toll, still says so, impersonated a ferry worker, stole another car, and went on his own high-speed chase on his own, and then went through the intersection. But I would like to finish having this conversation about crime, but it comes to accountability, because some people make the choice to make this a lifestyle. There's so many different attributes to it.
We go around again.
I think we should. So, Kara?
Narrow the question. What do you want to find out?
Terry, you're out there too.
I mean,
So, I did hear some of the, one of the other questions was around the linkage between mental health and crime, so maybe you want to take that linkage?
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I know firsthand, I've been incarcerated. I've also been a victim of crime several times in my life. And so this is very near and dear, and I think I am actually a national expert. I'm going to DC next week for a national meeting with bipartisan stakeholders on this specific issue. Post-traumatic stress from adverse childhood experiences is fueling all of this. And people turn to substance use or they are violent because they don't know how to regulate themselves, because they didn't get a first chance at life, to tell you the truth. And, you know, we need more services. I was so happy that I was able to get a budget proviso through the legislature to fund Paulsville Cares, which is an innovative program using firefighters that the community actually doesn't see as, you know, they trust firefighters, right? There's tension with the community and the police because police have shown up historically in certain ways. But utilizing our firefighter allies to provide mental health services on the ground out in the community was an innovative project that I funded last session.
Thank you, Terry. Spencer?
There's no question that we have got to strengthen our mental health resources and our drug treatment facilities and resources. I mean, but there is such a nexus between law enforcement and the treatment of underlying issues like homelessness, mental health, drugs, and all of that. And right now what we have is a legislature that, in response to the Supreme Court's Blake decision, that said there wasn't a mental state component to drug possession laws, you need to prove that they knew that they had the drugs. The legislature should have put the word knowingly in the bill, in the law. They knowingly possessed drugs, but instead the legislature downgraded drug possession to a misdemeanor and then said you're not going to get charged until your third offense. But there's no statewide database of how many times have you been stopped for drug possession. So now we have a situation where our law enforcement can't enforce the drug laws because they don't know how many times they've stopped someone. That's why walk cops and the fraternal order of police have supported me. We need some rationality and balance in these laws.
Thank you, Spencer. Addison?
So I support funding first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, and there's also a really great program out of Eugene, Oregon called Cahoots, where folks, mental health professionals, respond first to mental health crises with police as backup. We're starting to do some of that in the state, but I would love to see programs like that expand so that, again, our law enforcement and our firefighters are not asked time and again to be first responders to these failures. Look, the legislature on Blake should have seen that coming. As a lawyer, I can tell you the court system works very slowly. It takes years for things to work through the court. By the time it gets to the Supreme Court, it takes 3 years. Should have seen that as one of the only states, not the only state in the country without that mental state component, that should have been addressed a lot sooner, and that's a priority for me once we get to Olympia.
Yes, James.
So again, I'd like to agree with the good majority of the panel here. We do need mental health services. And again, there was a little story about a gentleman, I can't remember specifically what state, but he was in a residential neighborhood having an extreme mental issue. And the cops showed up, and instead of actually helping him, he turned wrong to one of them, and they just shot him. So we're not taking care of our mentally ill folks. If you go to downtown Shelton, you'll see homelessness is ravaging the downtown area. And that's because of mental illness. We have no place for people to get help, so we need to make sure that that is a priority. And as well as addiction services. When it comes to drugs, addiction is a disease rather than a crime. And we need to stop criminalizing people who are addicted and really give better chances at a life past that addiction. So I will absolutely work to make that a priority.
Thank you, James. Gina?
So again, being able to allow government to clear the way and make a path to support by reduction of regulations and taxes and allowing the community to participate in the process. We can create a facility that allows for people to have the pathway to recovery, to safety, and long-term options to be able to give back into the community as well and have opportunity for apprenticeship. So as Tara very well knows, that the accountability through our legal system can be a pathway to change life and to recovery. And so I too know what it's like to have experience with substance abuse, and that different people have different ways that they overcome. Sometimes it's a personal choice. Sometimes it's by being arrested, by being incarcerated. And so we need to be able to open the option for people to choose, if they so choose to, want to partake in a facility like this for mental health reasons or for drug abuse, or if it's because of crime committed because of drug abuse.
Thank you. Two last questions. I'm going to make one a lightning round, so it's a yes or no. I love the question being on the Public Facilities Board. Should counties and cities be given additional taxing authority, or should Olympia be the leader in fiscal responsibility? Spencer, yes or no?
Being a local government guy, I believe the local government control is very important.
Thank you. Addison?
I also believe that local government control is important. However, we have to be fiscally responsible across the board.
Thank you. James?
I agree with that, and I think both to make it work.
Thank you. Janelle?
I think both is important to being able to have the option for the local constituents to be able to speak to it through the local government as well.
Thank you. Tara?
Yes, and both nuance, right? I do believe local government should have some authority, but I also think sometimes the state needs to keep the local governments in check, like with housing and zoning regulations.
Okay, thank you. Next, last question. Most of the rest of what's left on here are questions for a national stage, but so many issues that are on the national stage currently also affect our lives here in Washington. Whether it's police reform, whether it's abortion, whether it's a whole host of different things that are on this table. What is something that you will carry as your banner through the rest of your campaign and into your term that you will fight for in Olympia that is on the national stage today? Addison.
Perhaps where my friend opponent is opening statement on civility in politics and getting back to just working on issues for our community and not making our politics about mudslinging and personality contests, but focused on you, the people, and what you need and how we can use our experience to help.
Thank you, Addison. James.
So when I started the campaign, I didn't imagine that I would be running a campaign during the fall of Roe v. Wade, which has been tried for 50 years, and unfortunately it succeeded. Reproductive health affects us all. I don't have children, but it affects me. So what we have now is we have 51% of the country who are looking at their lawmakers and saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to save my rights? Well, I'm looking forward to a constitutional amendment to the Washington State Constitution to enshrine safe, legal reproductive care. This is vital to the survival of the species. If an ectopic pregnancy happens, the only cure for that is an abortion service. Otherwise, the woman dies. So let's save some lives. And let's enshrine this in law so we don't have to worry about it being taken away.
Thank you, James. Jenna.
Well, I think naturally the biggest thing that people are seeing and facing are inflation. So when it comes to a WIP crisis and just accountability, and so I will ensure that we will have a pathway for accountability for our elected and unelected officials to be sure to support the people through crisis in our businesses so we can survive and thrive through any crisis, and not be able to speak to the issues locally as well. So I will ensure that people will have a pathway to ensure that during crises we will have protections as well as a route to be able to hold any unelected official accountable to our Constitution as well as our elected officials.
Thank you, Jenna. Tara.
Yeah, I think nationally there is a lot going on, but the biggest thing that I'm spending the most of my time on right now is protecting doctors and nurses who want to still provide reproductive health care to people who are, looking to have an abortion, or other things like in vitro fertilization and just our overall lack of access to health care, especially in this county where we only have a religious hospital that does not provide or puts safeguards around sterilization, in vitro fertilization, gender affirming care, death with dignity, all of those things. But since the fall of the Roe decision, I have spent a lot of time working on responding to the providers here who are worried that if they provide abortion care for people coming from Texas or other states, Idaho, that they will be criminally held liable. So I am on the leadership team in the legislature focusing on that.
Thank you, Tara. Spencer.
No surprise, I'm very happy with where Addison started on civility. I've already spoken to that, so I have another issue that I want to talk about, and that is our cost of living. We have a nationwide cost of living problem. It was spoken to just a little bit in terms of inflation. But Washington State is becoming more and more difficult to live in, work in, do business in, hire people in, and move goods and services around. And it's really a problem. I mean, I talk to people on the doorstep, and I'm telling you, every day I hear someone say, how can I afford to live here? And that's a major problem. We had a $15 billion revenue surplus last year. Poof. It's gone. Where did that money go and what happened? We added new taxes. We increased taxes. The Department of Ecology numbers estimate that our gas taxes are going to practically double next year. This is serious. This has a major economic impact on people's day-to-day lives, raising their families, working, getting their kids to school. This is serious stuff, and it's a nationwide problem. It's a Washington State problem.
Thank you all for your participation in the question and answer portion. We'll now move to our closing statements. We'll start here with James.
All right, thank you again to the Greater Kitsap Chamber and Public Resource Farmville and John for having me here today. I'm incredibly honored. This is the most important election that I have ever seen in my lifetime, and I know we keep saying that every election. But right now, again, 51% of this country has lost a fundamental right to their own bodily autonomy. And we have a chance now to try and right this wrong. And compassion and empathy is what I will bring to the state legislature. I am about the people, not the corporations, not the 1%. I have not gotten $1 from any corporation in donations to my campaign. I'm proud of that factor because it means that I am not being bought and paid for by the special interests. I am being chosen by the people to represent them. And that's vitally important to those who want to run for this office. Business is thriving. Business in large corporations is thriving because of the higher costs that they're bringing down onto the people. People need help. People need somebody who will be on their side, and I will be that person for you. It's really, really scary out there, I know, but we need rural Democrats in the legislature to represent the rural interests and the rural people. So thank you again for having me here. My name is James Dehart. I'm running for Legislative District 35, Position 1 Representative, and I'm very glad. I'd be very happy to have you with me.
Thank you, James. Addison.
Well, I want to thank the Greater Kitsap Chamber and all of you for this forum, and I want to get partner to the Chamber and the small businesses across Kitsap County in the legislature. We talked about civility in our politics multiple times, and my friend here mentioned that this week I got hit with 2 pieces from his party that completely, for example, misrepresented where I stand on the issue of reproductive freedom. It's a personal private decision that should be left to a woman and her doctor and not to politicians. And everyone should be treated with equal liberty under the Constitution is something I fundamentally believe. And that was lied about this week. And I hope that is mentioned to the party to avoid doing these things going forward. Look, we are trying to focus on an issues-based campaign that is about you and what you need and how we can use our experience to make life better. Again, my experience, been working with survivors of crime, working with people living paycheck to paycheck. So if you are concerned about rising costs, if you're concerned about public safety, I'm ready to get to work for you. And I want to get to work for you. Years ago, I've been hoping for an opportunity to make more of a difference for this community that I love and grew up in, than on just a case-by-case basis. I'm ready to get started, and I hope you're in your vote.
Thank you, Addison. Spencer?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate Addison's words and agree with him. I'm running because I am concerned about the direction that our state is going. I'm concerned about the future for ourselves, for our families, for our kids. I am concerned that irrational, reckless policies have been made in Olympia, that irrational and reckless spending has happened, and that the treatment of the average citizen, the regular person trying to make it, trying to provide for their family, has been absolutely disrespectful. I'm running because our leaders need to be humble. Our leaders need to be humble. They need to come at the job with a sense that they stand in the place of their friends and neighbors back home, that they are there to do what is right for their neighbors. I'm proud that I've grown up in this community and lived in this district my whole life. The ills that we face in Washington, from the governmental perspective, comes down to, in my view, a lack of communication in the legislature between the two parties. The majority party is very close to a supermajority. It has made it totally unnecessary to talk to the minority party and to hear the views of the minority party and the people they represent. That leads to worse policy, in my view. In my view, the best policy happens when the most people are talking to each other, wrestling through the issues, and doing the best they can to get to the right answer. We need bipartisanship. We need to talk to the other people. This is not cliche. I talk about this as often as I can because it's emblematic of my perspective on life. My campaign manager is a liberal Democrat. I hired her because I respect her and I respect her intellect and I respect that we want to do this thing together. If you are worried about the direction of our state, then I hope you see in me a person who will bring a different perspective to the way government is done in Olympia. And I really appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spencer. Tara.
Thanks, John. I just want to say, it was really refreshing to sit with Spencer and Addison. And, in Olympia, that is what I have done over the last 2 years, is work across the aisle. I'm sad that Dan's not here. I actually texted him to see how he's doing, make sure he's okay. Jesse Young was my number 2 on my voting rights restoration bill. Michelle Collier was my number 2 on a couple of bills. I have worked across the aisle, and I've been able to meet with Rick Booth and Paige Markey. It's unfortunate that my opponent has gone naked on me. That's the only reason we don't have a relationship. But I have grown up in this community. I have overcome, I was a mother at 15 years old. I pulled myself out. I was the first person in my family to ever graduate high school, let alone go on to college. I have worked my butt off to come out of poverty, to fight for low-income people and people that need an opportunity and a first chance at life, and also working class families who are just struggling day to day to get by. I have a wide variety of experiences. I've been a registered nurse. I am a lawyer. I have been in so many different roles in my life, and all of those experiences that I work, I do every day on behalf of the people here in my district. I grew up here. I'm very connected here. I will take Page's calls. I will take Rick's calls. And thank you so much for the honor.
I come from a background of different roots, really. So Karen and I have a lot of similarities in our background. I was the first in my immediate family to graduate from high school. I know what addiction does to families. I know what a broken home is like. I know what it's like to be in an abusive marriage. I know what it's like to leave to put my life on hold to support my family, even though I could have continued on and excelled in my career. I could have taken different paths. I know what it's like to go through family law. I know what it's like to have a lawyer. I know what it's like to represent myself. I know what it's like to have to overcome the consequences of abuse. I know what it's like to rise above it. I know what it's like to support others through it. I know what it's like to overcome addiction and also support others who've chosen to change their lives. And so I know with community working together that is really what creates a great, beautiful synergy where accountability along with support and giving back can become a beautiful new cycle that we can have available for people to choose from. So I am thankful to be able to step up and bring a new perspective, a perspective for all, not just for some, but for all, and also not one that is my opinion, that is not my perspective, is not my beliefs, but my role as a legislator, which is number 1 according to the Washington State Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, where the government receives its just powers from the consent of the people to maintain and protect individual rights. That is the role of the government. The government needs to step up and clear a way for a pathway for that to allow us to do that. And we shall have accountability to ensure that we can all afford to live, because neglecting studies, neglecting facts, neglecting the voices of the people and other representatives that have been voted to represent the people is wreaking havoc in our state and our inability to afford to live and have safety. Thank you. My name is Janelle Olson. I run the 23rd State District Position 1.
Thank you, Janelle. So I did my job today, team. Normally I walk away knowing who I'm going to vote for. I will tell you these two, the 26 made it difficult for me today, but I hope we provided you some answers that you didn't have when you arrived here this morning. So let's now give all of our candidates a warm. My name is John Morrissey. I'm the current chair of the Greater Kitsap Chamber of Commerce, and it is my pleasure to introduce our CEO, David Evans, who will tell you a little bit more about our next exit issues.
Thank you. All right. Okay. As John said, I'm David Evans, and I'm the president and CEO. So first of all, thank you for filming today's exit issues, and we will be having it on as soon as we get the link. We will let everyone know where that's at. Thanks, Phil, again for a great service at the Cloverleaf, and thank you all for supporting this great work. For over 25 years, so it is a long-standing tradition in Bremerton. So please support your local businesses. Thank you all the candidates. You all, as always, raised for the occasion, and thank you. And just to let you know, the chamber will be sending the governor a letter signed by over 100 businesses in the greater Kitsap area to support more funding for the ferry system as well. So that was an issue that the board felt very strongly about and voted for, and so we collected businesses. It's not too late though. If you would like your name added to it, you can do that. That letter will go out this afternoon. So thank you all for coming. Next week we have the county races. We have the county commissioner race, and we have the county auditor race. Again, 8 o'clock in the Cloverleaf. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.